it is going to take away rights that we have taken for granted for decades. The right to not be dismissed at the whim of your employer, the right to be able to hold your employer accountable when they behave badly towards you. These are going to be taken away. It's going to make workers as individuals in the workplace far more vulnerable to bad behavior and bad treatment and summary dismissal at the hands of their employers. And this is a huge step back for working people in this country. This is a government that's not only attacking collective rights, it's attacking individual rights. And the two types of rights are really connected. If you don't have collective rights, if you don't have strong unions to protect workers, and if you don't have workers who are confident enough to participate in unions, then your rights as an individual worker will be stripped away. And that's really what we're seeing here.
Kia ora koutou, and a warm welcome to episode 15 of Locked Out with Craig Renney. By day, I'm the economist and director of policy at the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. But by night, this podcast looks at the numbers in New Zealand and asks the hard questions so that you can too. We hope you're both enjoying the show and what we do at Locked Out. If you like the analysis that you hear in the show and think that others would too, then recommend us to your friends or even your enemies. Also, give us a recommendation wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps get the word out. Now, here at Locked Out, we're always interested in what our viewers and listeners want to know. If it's making you say, did the government just spend $6 billion of ghost chips? You can be in no doubt we are too. So get in touch. I'm on X, Blue Sky, and Substack. We want to hear how we can help you better navigate the numbers being thrown around by politicians and experts alike. Now, we're very fortunate on the show tonight to have my NZCTU colleague, Gayaal Iddamalgoda, lawyer, all-round gentleman, and consumer of all of the feijoas whenever we have any in the office. Now, I've got my learned friend in here today to talk about yet another assault on workers' rights in the form of the proposed Employment Relations Amendment Bill. Now, this bill changes the Employment Relations Act, which is the principal piece of legislation that regulates employment relationships in New Zealand. Now, according to the government and its PR document, this bill aims to make New Zealand's business settings more competitive and to give businesses the confidence and support to grow, to hire, and to innovate. This bill seeks to reduce compliance requirements and associated costs, including for small to medium-sized businesses. Now, if we cut through that spin, we're here to find out what it really does and how it will affect working people right across the country. So let's talk with Gayaal now. Gayaal, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show with me today. Now, at this point, presenters usually lie and say how they know how busy their guests are. But for once, I actually really do know how busy you are because you work with me. So very briefly, can you tell the listeners and can you help them out by telling them what's in the Employment Relations Amendment Bill?
Kia ora, Craig. Thank you. It's a very important and significant bill because it's really going to attack workers' rights on several fronts. There are 6 parts to the bill, and the first part is that it'll make it easier to misclassify workers. So whether a worker is classified as an employee or a contractor is really important, because if they're classified as an employee in terms of what they do and in terms of the nature of their work, they have access to rights and protections in the Employment Relations Act as employees. So this means that a lot of thousands of workers who are casual workers will be deemed to be contractors and therefore outside of those protections, regardless of whether or not in reality they are employees. So that's the first thing that this bill does. The second thing is that it guts and completely ruins and destroys the personal grievance system that we have. So it makes it impossible in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, for people who raise valid personal grievances to get any remedies and to be able to hold their employers accountable for bad behavior. The next thing it does is that it moves us towards fire at will. And it has an income threshold, which is set at an arbitrary rate of $180,000 a year. And anyone who earns at or above that threshold can be essentially dismissed without any reason being needed to be provided. The next thing it does is that it removes the 30-day rule and takes away active choice forms, which means that it stifles union access to workers. The next thing it does is that it takes more rights away from workers who are subject to 90-day trial periods. So currently, if a worker is dismissed under a 90-day trial period, you cannot challenge the dismissal, but you can challenge other forms of bad treatment and other forms of disadvantage. This bill will make it impossible for you to challenge a disadvantage or any bad treatment if the employer can connect it to the dismissal. So not only can they dismiss you, they can treat you as badly as they like in the process of dismissing you. And the last thing it does is that it makes it easier for bad employers to justify their behavior. And this will provide them with tremendous cover.
So there's a lot here.
So,
I mean, certainly in terms of the overall bill, I mean, currently, as you'll be aware, because you're also in front of the court as for this, there's a whole bunch of Uber drivers currently taking Uber to court to prove that they're workers rather than contractors. And this would essentially stymie the ability of anyone after the bill is passed to continue to take their employers to court. Is that a fair summary of one of the key things this bill will do?
Yes. So if you look at the criteria that the bill has for classifying certain workers as what they call specified contractors, it essentially covers casual workers, thousands of casual workers. So it says you have to be able to work more than one job. What vulnerable, precarious, casualized worker in New Zealand doesn't have to work multiple jobs in order to make ends meet? Many do. Thousands do. It says that you should be able to turn down work. That's just a simple, that we already have that. That's what casual employment is. So what this bill does is it finds the most vulnerable employees, the people who are most likely to be misclassified as contractors so that we can avoid giving them rights, and shunts them into the category of contractor so that employers can simply put a label in the document saying you're a contractor, you are casual enough, and therefore we're going to deem you to be a contractor regardless of whether or not you're really an employee. And an employee is someone who's controlled and directed by the employer.
And you also mentioned that there's an extension of the 90-day trials rule as part of this. Essentially, that if you it will bring it to new employees. Sort of, can you explain that a bit more? Can you explain why the government wants to extend that 90-day trial rule even further?
So the 90-day trial rule, as you know, is very harsh. It strips you of your ability to challenge an unjustifiable dismissal for the first 90 days of your employment. And so when it first came in, the courts interpreted it very narrowly because it is actually stripping a very fundamental right. Now, what the courts have said is that even though you can't raise an unjustifiable dismissal during this time, if it's a valid 90-day trial period, you can look at other things your employer does. So if your employer mistreats you, breaches fundamental terms of the employment agreement, causes you to suffer disadvantage during the time that you're employed under the 90-day trial period, you can still raise those. But what this is trying to do is they're trying to take away that narrow right that 90-day trial period workers have and make it so that even if you do have a disadvantage that's not directly related to the dismissal, if the employer can connect it to the dismissal, then you can't talk about it, you can't raise it, you can't seek any remedy. They not only can sack you, they can also treat you badly in the process, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Sounds like a lot of workplaces in New Zealand, but I guess beyond the obvious, sort of what problems this is going to create for workers. The ability to have safe and fair workplaces, the ability to have your rights enforced. Is this like to help or to hinder New Zealand workers?
This is going to hinder New Zealand workers. It is going to take away rights that we have taken for granted for decades. The right to not be dismissed at the whim of your employer. The right to be able to hold your employer accountable when they behave badly towards you. These are going to be taken away. It's going to make workers as individuals in the workplace far more vulnerable to bad behavior and bad treatment and summary dismissal at the hands of their employers. And this is a huge step back for working people in this country. And it also goes step in step with an attack on collective rights. So one of the earliest things that this government did is took away fair pay agreements. It has also taken significant steps to limit the ability of unions to function with the partial strike legislation, penalizing workers who take any form of industrial action effectively. So what you can see here is this is a government that's not only attacking collective rights, it's attacking individual rights. And the two types of rights are really connected. If you don't have collective rights, if you don't have strong unions to protect workers, and if you don't have workers who are confident enough to participate in unions, then your rights as an individual worker will be stripped away. And that's really what we're seeing here.
So all in all, the ability of workers to be able to access people like you, employment lawyers, to be able to access to get their rights delivered, to be able to access their terms and conditions, and to be able to have good workplaces. This is just the tip of a large iceberg of employment changes, as you say, from fair pay agreements, 90-day trials, even health and safety reform. So right now across the country, we're attempting to build an economy based upon poorer workplace rights, making it easier for employers to fire you and making it harder for employees, and these are genuine employees, not contractors, employees being able to access their work. Now, to me, this is, it's core trade union work, but we can only make this work if other people get involved. So how can people get involved in this particular bill?
Well, the most direct thing you can do in terms of interacting with Parliament is to make a submission to the Select Committee. So this bill is before the Select Committee, and the cutoff for making written submissions is the 13th of August this year. So please make a written submission, get in touch with your union and support whatever actions they're doing and support their submissions as well. And it's there are certain things that I think every New Zealand worker should be emphasizing in these submissions. Make sure that you call the government out. The rhetoric that they're sort of trying to fix on this is that this is about fairness, it's about balance. It's absolutely not about balance. It's about leaving employees bare. It's about completely unbalancing the system in favor of of employers, and that is what really needs to be emphasized, that we understand it. One of the things that the government's doing with this bill is that they're attacking on different sort of angles, and it can appear as complex, but really we have to get to the bottom of it and be like, this is a bill that is designed to overall strip workers and leave them vulnerable of their rights. So those are the kinds of things that we should be emphasizing in our submissions to the Select Committee. So first and foremost, make a submission to the Select Committee by the 13th of August.
And this, they can access, and workers and listeners and viewers of the show can access that current consultation via the parliamentary website. If they simply go to the submissions page on the Parliament website, they can access that. They can make a submission online. And so just to really, just really clear this up, what might they say to those decision makers in their submission?
Well, first of all, you should make it clear that you feel that the bill must be stopped, absolutely and completely. It should not go any further than Select Committee. Secondly, you should emphasize and you should say loud and clear that you see that the bill is unfair and unbalanced, contrary to the rhetoric of the government. It's absolutely unfair and unbalanced. And thirdly, I think we should all appreciate that this is a massive step towards fire at will, not only for high income earning employees, but for all employees. Because what is the point of being able to contest an unjustifiable dismissal if you can't get any remedies and if you can't hold your employer accountable for what they did? Basically, what they're doing is they're leaving a skeleton behind. So we need to say, this is fire at will. You're moving towards fire at will for all workers. We see you. This is unfair and unbalanced, and this whole bill should be scrapped immediately.
And so, just for viewers or listeners who might not be fully familiar, what's the risk with fire at will? what's the concern that if we brought those much more American style employment reforms into New Zealand, what kind of damage could it do?
Well, just like in the American movies, you can turn up to work and your boss can say, you're sacked, you're fired, and then you have to pack up and leave, and there's very little you can do about it. That's the vision that this bill represents, and it's scary. It's going to make a lot of people vulnerable. It's going to make people afraid to participate in their unions, to demand better terms and conditions, and it's going to drive down wages, conditions, and human dignity for working people all across the country.
Gayaal, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure, I know we will be making a submission. I encourage everybody who's watching and listening to make a submission via the parliamentary website, to work with their union on their submission. If they're not a member of a union, then join your union immediately after finishing this podcast. But Gayaal, thank you so much for your help and insight with this today. And I'm sure we'll have you again on the show soon.
Thank you, Craig.
And my thanks to Gayaal for him coming in and wasting his extremely expensive time talking with us. We're here now for the section of the show where we look at some of the numbers making the headlines in New Zealand. Now, 3 weeks ago, we looked at a new piece of research from the Reserve Bank looking at the what we call the Kiwi GDP number. And that showed for the first time GDP going into reverse. And if you look at the far right-hand corner, just above the locked out logo, and you follow that very carefully, in the week that followed, we saw another fall. And then if we see again this week, it's another fall again. 3 successive weeks in which the Reserve Bank is now forecasting that the economy is heading backwards. And during each week, that decline has got worse. And so when we tie that up with the inflation data that we saw also released this week, inflation data came in at what we thought was marginally better than expected, 2.7%. But if we peel away that top layer, if we take away petrol, inflation in New Zealand was actually 3.2%, well above the Reserve Bank's target figure. And in some areas, it was very high indeed. Energy costs rose 9.9%. We saw rates bills rise 12.2%. Insurance bills rise by about 10%. We saw the cost of taking public transport increase enormously. And importantly, we saw a 23% fall in the costs of early childhood education, only it isn't real. That fall assumes that everyone who is able to is accessing their family boost payment. And as we discovered this week, only 159 families across the country are accessing the full $150 per fortnight payment. In fact, thousands of families, tens of thousands of families aren't getting the benefit of that family boost payment, meaning those inflation figures aren't real. And in fact, the real inflation figure is likely to be much higher. We'll have to wait until September to actually get the real inflation figure. And when we look at genuine household inflation, for the majority of households in New Zealand, their wages aren't going up in line with inflation. 48% of New Zealand workers got a pay rise less than 2%. Inflation's 2.7%. 59% of workers got a pay rise less than 3%. So the vast majority of workers across the country are basically standing still, or even worse, falling behind. And we have a cost of living crisis. The economy is going backwards. We know that unemployment is rising. As I ask you every week, do you feel back on track yet? Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We hope you found it in parts maddening and in parts enlightening. Again, we really encourage you to engage with the Employment Relations Amendment Bill. It's really important that your voice is heard, telling politicians that they shouldn't be taking this bill any further. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a recommendation or a review on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you download. Locked Out looks forward to talking with you more next week. don't work too hard. Goodbye.